Moving to a brand new place feels a lot like being handed a blank page. I'd packed up everything familiar. My routines, my friends, the little rituals that made me feel grounded, and traded them for a city I'd never lived in. New streets, new neighbors, new everything. First, it was exciting. The novelty kept me going while I figured out how to build a life from scratch. But the loneliness crept in faster than I expected. So, I did what any millennial might do. I joined a local Facebook group dedicated to making friends. It was surprisingly active. There were weekly meetups for trivia nights, coffee shop crawls, even hikes. I'd show up, introduce myself, and try to find some common ground. And honestly, in the beginning, it felt like it was working. People were warm, chatty, curious. I started recognizing faces and even looked forward to our Saturday hangouts. I thought I'd found the perfect way to create a little community in this big, unfamiliar place. I was wrong, but it would take me a while to realize just how wrong. Because that's when B entered the picture. If you'd asked me back then, I'd have said B seemed nice. She was friendly, a little reserved, but she had a dry sense of humor I liked. We both loved old movies, cooking, and talking about books most people hadn't heard of. During our first few meetups, we chatted a lot. I didn't think anything of it. It was a relief to find someone easy to talk to. Early on, I made sure to mention my relationship. My partner and I were doing long distance, but we were serious and committed. I was upfront about that with everyone, including B. I thought I was being clear. A few weeks in, B started messaging me outside the group events. First, it was harmless. "Hey, did you finish that book? I found this recipe you might like." Nothing unusual. But then the tone shifted. The messages got longer, more personal. She'd tell me she felt like I understood her better than anyone, that she couldn't wait to see me at the next meetup. I felt uneasy, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she was just lonely. Maybe she was just being friendly. Then came the night she confessed she had feelings for me. We were walking back to the parking lot after a meetup, and she suddenly stopped and turned to me. "I don't know how to say this, but I like you. Like, more than a friend." I froze. I tried to be as gentle as possible. "I'm flattered," I said carefully. "But I'm in a relationship, and I really don't feel the same way." She looked at me with an expression I still can't quite describe. Disappointment mixed with something darker. She didn't say much else, just nodded stiffly and left. The next morning, I woke up to several long messages. At first, she sounded hurt, which I understood. But then it shifted to angry. She accused me of leading her on, said I was playing games, and called me selfish. I was stunned. I didn't reply right away. I needed time to process. But when I did respond, I tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry you feel hurt," I wrote. "I truly never meant to give you any other impression. I was always honest about my relationship." She didn't reply. At the next meetup, she sat across from me, arms folded, and didn't speak a word, just stared. It was uncomfortable, but I tried to keep things normal. Unfortunately, things only got worse from there. She started coming to every single meetup I attended, always positioning herself somewhere she could watch me. If I tried to talk to other people, she'd hover just close enough to make it awkward. And then she started talking. I don't know exactly what she told people, but it didn't take long for the atmosphere in the group to change. People were polite but distant. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations died when I walked over. Eventually, I realized I didn't belong there anymore. So I quietly left the group. Months passed. I moved on with my life. My partner and I closed the distance between us, finally living in the same place. We unpacked boxes, started building little routines, and slowly, the sting of that Facebook group faded. When you're in a healthy relationship, you start to notice how unhealthy everything else had been. I'd almost forgotten about B. Almost. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. "How are you? I miss hanging out with you." For a moment, I thought I was reading it wrong. I read it again and again. This was the same person who'd called me selfish, who'd told people I'd strung her along, who'd made it impossible for me to feel welcome in a group I joined simply to find community. And now, many months later, she was casually acting like nothing had happened. I set my phone down and felt a wave of irritation and amusement. It's such a specific kind of audacity to create drama, isolate someone, and then, when you're bored or lonely, try to reappear as if the slate is magically clean. First, I thought about ignoring her. It would have been the simplest option. No explanation, no engagement, no room for her to twist my words again. But a little part of me, the part that remembered how she'd sat across from me in those meetups, staring in silent accusation, wanted something more. Not an argument, not a scene. Just a small, undeniable reminder that I was no longer the person she could manipulate. See, I'd always kept my profile picture blank. For privacy, for simplicity, to avoid giving anyone access to parts of my life they hadn't earned. But now, I realized there was one person I wanted to see. I wanted her to know I hadn't been pining for her friendship, that I wasn't sitting around waiting for her to decide when I deserved to be treated decently again. I wanted her to see that I was happy, loved, and utterly unbothered by the hole she'd tried to carve out of my life. It wasn't about rubbing it in. It was about showing her that the power she once had, the ability to make me feel small, was gone. I scrolled through my phone, flipping past dozens of photos. Dinner dates, movie nights, lazy Sundays spent curled up together. Each image felt like proof that I'd built something real and good, far from the petty high school politics she'd clung to. There was one photo in particular that felt right. It wasn't posed. Just my partner and me, sitting on our old couch, arms around each other, laughing at something I don't even remember now. It was simple, warm, real, and it said everything I didn't feel like spelling out in a text. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to change my profile picture, for the first time in years. Not for likes, not for validation, just for her. So she'd understand, without me typing a single word, that her version of the story had no place in my life anymore. Once I'd made up my mind, I felt surprisingly calm. There was no rush of adrenaline, no second-guessing. Just a quiet sense of resolve, like setting down a heavy box you've been carrying too long. I opened the Facebook app, heart steady, and tapped on the little blank silhouette that had been my profile picture for years. A prompt popped up. Update profile photo? Yes. I scrolled through my camera roll again, just to be sure. The picture I'd picked still felt perfect, casual and warm, not posed or performative. Just two people who loved each other, caught in a moment of genuine happiness. Exactly the kind of simple, ordinary joy B had tried to convince me I didn't deserve. It felt almost ceremonial, the way I hovered over the save button. I thought about all the versions of myself she tried to define. The selfish one, the manipulative one, the problem in her story. But none of those labels were true. And this photo was proof that I knew who I really was, and that I wasn't interested in her story anymore. I didn't add a caption. I didn't tag anyone. I just closed the app and sat there for a second, letting the relief settle in. Then I went back to my messages. Her text, "How are you? I miss hanging out with you," was still sitting there, waiting. For a moment, I considered replying. Part of me wanted to list out every reason she'd lost the right to speak to me so casually. To tell her exactly how her gossip and stares had made me feel like an outsider in a city I was trying so hard to call home. But I didn't. I realized that no explanation would ever matter to her. Some people don't want clarity. They want access. They want the door to stay cracked open so they can wander in and out whenever it suits them. I was done leaving that door unlocked, so I clicked mark as read. No reply, no reaction, and just like that, the conversation was over. I set my phone down, feeling lighter than I had in months. There was nothing loud about it. No final confrontation, no last word. Just a picture. A little window into the life I'd built without her. One she no longer had any part in. I didn't expect any fireworks when I changed my profile picture and left her message on read. And for a little while it was quiet. She didn't reply. She didn't call. She didn't try to guilt-trip me into responding. Part of me wondered if she'd even noticed. Maybe she'd already moved on to her next story, her next convenient source of attention. But a few days later, I got the confirmation I didn't know I was waiting for. A mutual acquaintance. Someone I hadn't spoken to since leaving the Facebook group, sent me a message. "Hey, just wanted to say I saw your new profile picture. You look really happy. Hope everything's going well." It was a simple note, but the subtext was clear. B had seen it too. I didn't reply to the acquaintance with any details. I just said thanks and wished them well. But privately, I felt a tiny thrill of satisfaction. Because whether B would admit it or not, she'd seen exactly what she needed to see. I was doing fine, better than fine. I'd built a life without her drama, without her need to control every narrative. And no matter how many months had passed, she didn't get to stroll back in and pretend the damage never happened. For a few weeks after that, I kept expecting another message. Maybe an attempt to save face. "I'm glad you're happy." Or a question. "So, who's in the picture?" But none came. I think on some level, she knew there was nothing left to say. The people who had once believed her gossip probably saw the photo too. And maybe they wondered if they judged too quickly. Or maybe they didn't care. It didn't matter. Because the biggest shift wasn't how anyone else saw me. It was how I saw myself. After everything she'd done, spreading rumors, isolating me, trying to make me feel like an intruder, there was still a part of me that wondered if I was being too sensitive. If maybe I was partly to blame for how it all fell apart. But when she reached out, so casually, as if she hadn't burned every bridge between us, I realized something important. I hadn't imagined any of it. She really had treated me like I was disposable. Like my boundaries were optional. Like my feelings were an inconvenience. And her silence after I posted that picture was proof that she knew it too. Some people are only sorry when they see you've moved on. And some people aren't even sorry then. But either way, the outcome is the same. You learn you're better off without them. In the end, there was no dramatic closure. No long message admitting she'd been wrong.
No επάλεγη.
No attempt to explain. Just silence. And honestly, that was better than anything she could have said. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't a big confrontation. It isn't proving your point or collecting witnesses to validate your side of the story. It's living your life so fully and freely that the people who once tried to diminish you have no place in it anymore. For years, I thought the only way to heal from betrayal was to get answers. To have the other person look me in the eye and confess they treated me unfairly. But waiting for closure from someone who never cared about, I used to replay everything be said and did. The sudden coldness, the rumors she spread, the way she sat across from me at meetups with that blank, superior stare. I'd wonder if I could have handled it differently, if I'd somehow led her on without realizing it. But the truth is simple. I was clear from the start. I never lied about who I was or what I wanted. She just didn't like hearing no. And that wasn't my fault. Changing my profile picture wasn't about making her jealous. It wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming my own story. It was about reminding myself that I didn't need her validation, or anyone else's, to feel good about my life. It was a small, quiet gesture, but it meant everything to me, because it marked the moment I stopped letting her behavior define how I saw myself. I stopped wondering whether I deserved the way she treated me. I stopped believing I needed her approval to belong. Now, when I think about that time in my life, I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel done. Done with the stories that weren't true. Done with the guilt that never belonged to me. Done with the need to be understood by someone who never intended to understand me. Some people measure their worth by how many people orbit around them. I measure mine by how fully I can stand on my own 2 feet, knowing I don't need to dim my light to make someone else comfortable. So yes, I changed my profile picture. I left her on read. And I kept moving forward. Because that's the best revenge of all. A life you don't have to justify to anyone.